Warm greetings and namaste. My name is Resh Ramasamy. Welcome to my presentation titled Negotiating and Navigating Online Teaching and Learning Spaces Amid the Pandemic. I would like to assert a heartfelt thank you to the Australian College of Applied Professions and the National Heads of Counselling and Psychotherapy Education Network for affording me the privilege to share my narrative on my teaching journey and teaching experiences within a digital space. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting today, and to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. The use of information and communication technology has created a new teaching and learning concept in education known as Cybergolgi. The Cybergolgi for engaged learning model was coined by Wang and Kang in 2006, and it's created particularly for online settings that involve more generative and constructive learning activities and task immersion. It features 3 overlapping and intersecting domains, which encapsulate cognitive, emotive, and social factors. Wang and Kang argued that engaged learning within a digital space will only occur when the critical factors within each domains have been acknowledged and attended to. One of the central elements of Cybergolgi is that the intent to combine fundamentals of pedagogy, andragogy, and heterogogy to arrive at a new approach of teaching and learning within an online space. Now, most of what I'm about to share in this presentation originates from my teaching experience and expertise, and it might be common sense to most or all of you in this conference. But I'm hoping the presentation will add and benefit to your teaching practices within a digital space. Moreover, due to time constraints, I won't be able to share the framework or discuss the framework in its entirety. Therefore, I've picked out some elements within each factors for discussion and further illumination. Before I discuss those 3 factors, I will also provide examples when talking about those factors and how I, as an educator, deploy the various factors in my teaching practices. So let's talk about cognitive factors briefly. So the cognitive domain pertains to the factors that initiate and instigate an individual's construction of knowledge. It explores the way an individual optimizes personal relevance and meaning through the knowledge construction process. Let's look at prior knowledge or prior experiences. Merrill 2002 reported, learning is encouraged when existing knowledge or prior experience is acknowledged. Powerful. As we know, learning proceeds primarily from prior knowledge and secondarily from the presented materials and content. Neglect of prior knowledge can result in the learner showing no or a lack of interest in the education content, no matter how well those intentions or instructions are orchestrated by the educator within the lecture or a task. Many of our students at ACAP, they come from different walks of life and they bring such rich experience and expertise. Whilst as a researcher myself, whilst I appreciate research and scientific evidence, I'm equally interested in discerning how learners understand the world around them through their lived experiences, which is reflective of their existing bank of knowledge. I often share my lived experiences and life stories in the classes openly, which has helped students to share theirs. This I found useful for students to relate their personal experiences to their educational experiences, which makes it not just a mere task or a business transaction, but something more personable, meaningful, and educative to them. In terms of the learning activities, task needs to be engaging, and this is especially crucial when you're engaging with learners in an online setting. Given I'm responsible for developing tutorials and tutorial activities for my classes as a national educator for 2 of my topics, I consciously include tasks and activities that help promote practical understandings and application. The tasks are also intended to dig deeper into a learner's tacit knowledge, which plays a huge influence over their explicit knowledge, which aids in that learning process. Students are not interested in bulky theories and notions. What they're wanting is how can they take what they have learned and apply it in their daily life and interactions. And this is especially relevant when engaging in an online class space to keep the content interesting and dynamic. I'm also in favor of gamification and game-based learning. For example, I incorporate Kahoot quizzes to keep the content interactive and engaging, and it's rooted within play-based learning modalities. The use of task analysis in the form of scaffolds I also found helpful in clarifying assessment instructions. Using a task analysis approach enables me to assess what the students are able to do, what are the steps involved in attempting and completing the assessments, what are the curriculum's objectives, and how, as an educator, can I support my students to achieve their learning goals and intended outcomes. And I found the task analysis especially useful in helping neurodiverse and disabled students in understanding the assessments as they require structure and predictability. One principle of pedagogy is double loop learning, which expands and extends into Cybergolgi. And double loop learning is an educational concept and process that involves teaching people or learners to think more deeply about their own assumptions and beliefs. It stresses the importance of developing students' meta-cognitive abilities, which includes things like self-reflection, self-evaluation, self-appraisal, and self-observation. For example, within my tutorial activities and classes, I welcome and embrace plentiful self-reflection, and I do encourage my students to think outside the square, to challenge archaic perceptions and ideologies, and to think out of their comfort zone. And this helps students and learners to consciously discern the implicit and explicit biases and assumptions, which helps them turn those difficult, those uncomfortable experiences and conversations into teachable moments for myself as an educator, but also for themselves as the learner. So it's a two-way reciprocal thing. It's a win-win situation for the educator and for the learner, of course. In terms of the social factors, when we think of personal attributes, we think of learner expectations. They must be accounted for. I often ask my students in my tutorials, what are their expectations from the unit and of me as an educator? And this is helpful in ensuring the expectations aligns with my teaching style and delivery and the content, of course. Let's be honest and face the truth. Students are consumers after all. I found they are increasingly demonstrating consumer-like behaviors and are now demanding even more value from institutions. There is a growing body of research that supports these assertions as well. The phrase, the student experience, has become particularly dominant and prevalent in higher education over the last decade. We must therefore find meaningful and personalized ways of meeting the needs of our students and learners. You can't obviously please all, but you can establish a common ground that is useful, and a consumer-focused mindset is also required in this regard. In terms of the social context, every learner possesses a background and a distinctive culture that the learner will undoubtedly bring to every learning endeavor or experience. I found referring to the theoretical tenets of intersectionality helpful in privileging learners' intersectional differences and how these differences shape and inform their learning experiences. In terms of the ecological systems theory by Bronfenbrenner, there are 5 different ecological environments: the micro, the meso, the exo, the macro, and the chronosystem levels. The micro environment, being the most influential environment of interaction, is crucial in determining if a student or a learner engages or disengages with the program or the content. And the micro interactions within a higher education setting usually pertains to interactions with academics, students, and professional staff. Therefore, as the national educator for 2 of my classes, I ensure the communication between staff and students are positive, timely, and enabling in nature. This helps with the development of a positive, evaluated sense of self-identity and social identity, which helps make students feel affirmed, important, and included. In terms of community and communication, as a narrative inquirer, I value the importance of storytelling. Okay, within the education context, narrative-based learning is grounded in the theory that humans define their experiences within the context of narratives. And whilst this is not conventional practice within academia, we need to understand people's stories. We need to understand when stories are shared in the right context, without the context being prostituted, and for an educative purpose. By sharing of stories, it creates an empowering and emancipatory effect. By sharing stories, it also helps us to reauthor our lives by creating new and inspired meanings. I also engage routinely in co-teaching in the form of teaming, which is one of the most effective forms of co-teaching. And this involves educators working together on planning, organizational delivery, assessment instructions, and so forth. The teaming approach helps with delivering the same content to students from different classes, which aids with information equity. This is especially important to circumvent unnecessary anxiety and angst when navigating online learning spaces among students. In terms of the emotive factors, teaching and learning are often framed as largely rational and objective and cognitively determined. But there's more research that supports the need for emotions to be a part of the teaching process. as students often experience a myriad of emotions, from feeling excited to frustrated, which can lead to a range of different emotional responses. So in terms of feelings of community, engagement requires a sense of fitting in within the larger contours of society and within the higher education setting as well. The feelings of belonging contributes to students' motivation, involvement, and satisfaction with their learning process. I often use the word in my classes, family unit, when interacting with my students. It has never been about me or them, but us as a collective. What's important is how do we as educators actively work in cultivating an in-group identity amongst our students and teachers through a person-centered manner. One initiative that I've deployed in my classes is called the Staff and Student Voice Initiatives. Students and staff share about their inspirational stories and how these stories are influential in helping other staff and other students to feel a sense of community. And feelings of learning atmosphere. Quality interaction among students and educators are conducive to a positive learning atmosphere, and one that is marked by socializations, rapport, connections, empathy, debates, consultations, and open negotiations. We need to remember this. We are not working with children, but we are working with adults. Respect should be at the center of what we do as educators. I always consciously and consistently make the effort to humanize what I do with my students and my staff in my interactions and my communications. Before we go around telling students how to behave, we as educators must have good self-awareness and lead by example by default. That concludes my presentation for today. Thank you for devoting your time and energy to attend this talk. I hope you've learned something from this presentation, and I look forward to answering any questions or comments. Thank you.